Hi, this is the Lute channel, and here we have another podcast. In this podcast, we talk with lutenists about lutes and about early music and everything else we want. Today I have here Sam Chapman. Thanks a lot for coming, Sam.
My pleasure.
So, Sam, talk a bit about your musical education, how music started in your life and how the lute also came into your life.
Okay, it's a long story. Are you ready?
Yes, I am. We have time.
It takes a while to get to the lute, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it starts really with my family, with my mother, who's a violinist. And of course, growing up in a musical family, there was always music around. My mum would be teaching violin at home, practicing at home, rehearsing, and we would go to concerts and things as well. I have two older brothers, and one of them was also very musical, plays the cello. And I suppose my first musical education, or my first attempts to play an instrument, began with the piano. When I was 6, I had my first piano lessons with what seemed to me at the time like a rather elderly gent called Mr. Osborne. I wonder if he was so old as I think he was when I look back now, who was a very distinguished pianist and experienced teacher. And I took my first lessons with him, and I remember very well coming with a lot of enthusiasm and excitement and motivation. I remember my first piece in the book, which was just one note, middle C. Diligently practicing that piece every morning, waking up at 6 o'clock, going down to the piano.
That's awesome.
Playing my one note.
Yeah, no. It's an important note, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very important note. And I was really excited about playing the piano. And unfortunately, that excitement didn't last. I think my teacher was... he didn't have a sense of humour, which seemed very important to me at the time. And he didn't have a sense of fun. And somehow I lost my enthusiasm for the piano. So having started so well, after a year, I was ready to stop. I did stop. And I really had lost all my motivation to play and my excitement. In fact, it was worse than that. I couldn't stand the piano, listening to the piano.
Because of your teacher?
I think so. I just had such a negative association with this instrument. And then for years afterwards, I think I was in my 20s before I could really listen to piano music and enjoy it again. Wow.
Became really like a trauma.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the importance of a good teacher.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're young, yeah.
And I think that's the main job of a teacher, especially when you have a student who comes to you with all of that excitement and motivation. And I practiced every day. I think I would love to have, students who are so motivated when they start. So
we are lucky if you have students that practice at all.
Well, no, my students do practice, of course. I think the main thing about teaching is to try not to disturb or to destroy that basic enthusiasm and love of the music and the motivation.
You're completely right.
And it's very sad when that happens. So I stopped playing the piano after a year or so. And the next instrument which I experimented with was the concertina.
That's incredible. I love the concertina. I have a concertina.
You have a concertina?
I have a concertina.
Wow.
The little one, it's by wood and with buttons on the both sides, but it's the kind of one that when you open, the same button when you open is one sound, when you close is another sound.
That's right. That's the kind I played as well.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
So my mother plays folk music.
Yeah.
And she played a lot for dancing.
This is all in
dancing.
England.
Yes, this is in England, yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Westcountry,
Yeah.
in a little village in Somerset.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mum would be out several times a week playing for folk dances, English, Scottish, Irish dances.
Great.
And actually it was my brother, Danny, who wanted to play the concertina
Mm-hmm.
and borrowed a couple of concertinas from a local maker and repairer. And so he had two concertinas at home. One was an English concertina, one was an Anglo concertina.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned the systems of the instrument. So the Anglo concertina is the one like you have, which makes a different sound when you push and when you pull.
Yeah.
And the English one makes the same sound.
Yeah.
So he borrowed these two instruments and to find out which one appealed to him, and quickly became clear that he was going to go for the English one, because my brother has a very scientific mind and likes a logical system, and the English system is certainly more logical really than the Anglo one.
Yeah.
The result of that being that there was this Anglo concertina kicking around the house, which to me was completely irresistible, and so I got my hands on it and started to teach myself a few tunes. I was about 7 years old at the time. Must have been.
That's great.
Just after I'd finished with the piano, I started on the concertina. And on the concertina, of course, I didn't have a teacher. I taught myself and worked it out myself. And what I liked so much about playing the concertina was learning to play by ear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was a really good training.
Mm-hmm.
And also playing with other people, because once I could play a bit, I started to go to sessions and festivals. And playing with other people, you develop a really good sense for rhythm and how to fit in a group, how to communicate with the other players, and of course how to learn tunes by ear, how to pick up by ear by listening. And I think those are skills which have been really, really helpful to me also in my work today.
Yeah, of course. It should be the most important thing in a musician, the developed ear. And this experience as a child, of course, it was very, very important. And you started to play with your family also.
Yeah.
Like you had a little folk group.
Yeah, I don't know. It was more informal than that. We would play together a little bit.
Just for fun at home.
And I still play the concertina. I've still got the same concertina that I had all those years ago.
That's incredible.
I've been quite active in the Irish music scene in Basel. Not so much in recent years, because it's just like with lutes, really. If you have an instrument which is working really well and well set up, you feel very inspired to practice and you're very motivated to play. And my concertina has got some issues, leaky bellows and sticky buttons and things like that. And I think if I were to have an instrument which would be a bit better set up, then I might be more involved in the folk music still today.
Yeah, absolutely. A good instrument makes a big part of playing. That's incredible. I had no idea you played concertina. And it's awesome. Maybe I'll have some lessons with you at some point, because it's really like I had one because I bought a very simple one, of course, like I think for the price I paid, it's good. For the price I paid, it's good. But the sound and the quality of the sound and this kind of like it's an instrument that works like a voice, that breathes, and it's so beautiful. It's so magical. I don't know. It's really, really, I like it a lot.
It's a really special sound, and actually playing the concertina has been quite useful to me in many ways over the years. I was thinking about when I first came to Basel, when I was 23, I think, and I didn't have any money. I didn't speak German. I had quite a lot of free time because I didn't come straight to the Schola. And I quickly realized that I could actually make a bit of cash busking with my concertina. So for a year or two, I really went quite regularly and went busking on the concertina.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, well, I made a little bit of money, not a huge amount, but the main thing was I met a lot of people, a lot of other musicians. In fact, I met Kate Deneen the first time.
That's
playing
amazing.
the concertina. I think she gave me some money. And I met other people as well, who I remained in contact with, and quite a few other musicians who loved the concertina, just like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
attracted to the sound
Mm-hmm.
and wanted to collaborate with me. So I ended up one guy who's a singer and guitarist who had a kind of new age pop band
Mm-hmm.
got me into the band, and I remember doing some gigs with them, and a completely
That's
new
great.
experience
Yeah.
for me. Or another local guy from Basel who
Mhm.
was into
That's awesome.
sea shanties and Irish music and writing
Yeah.
his own songs, and
Yeah.
I got involved with him, and actually I played on a couple of CDs with
Mhm.
his group on the concertina.
Mm-hmm.
And I even played the concertina with Akamus. Akademie für Alte Musik Berlin.
Tell us about this, please. Please.
Well, it was, I played occasionally with Akamus, and
Yeah.
I was booked to do a production of Ulisse by Monteverdi with them. And the production was in Ireland, in Kilkenny. So when I heard we were going to Ireland, I thought, well, I'm going to pack my concertina in the suitcase. I'm not going to miss out on that. Maybe there'll be some time to head over to a session or two after rehearsals. And indeed, that's actually what happened. We rehearsed in a very nice theatre in Kilkenny,
Mm-hmm.
and right over the road there was a pub
Mm-hmm.
which had a regular traditional music session. And so after rehearsals, I'd go over there with my concertina and met the local musicians and played along. I had a great time, and of course the other members of Akamus would also head over there after the rehearsal and have a pint of Guinness, and they were very surprised to see me put down my theorbo and pick up the concertina and play along jigs and reels.
Incredible.
Yeah, so the funny thing about that is we, in addition to doing the opera, Akamus also had a concert just as a group in the church in Kilkenny, where we played Italian instrumental music.
Mm-hmm.
And during rehearsals, there was one piece, I think it was a balletto by Marini, which had a really folky theme. It really sounded like folk music. And somebody had this idea, Sam, why don't you get your concertina out and play this piece on the concertina? And I was quite taken aback, and I remember thinking, are you sure that would be appropriate? You know, the concertina was invented about 200 years after Marini lived, and are you sure you want that? They said, yes, absolutely.
Please
get it out
do
and
it.
And have a go. So we had a go, and
I'm sure it was a
everybody
success.
was very
yeah.
convinced that it sounded really good. And
Yeah.
I thought, well, okay, you
Great.
asked for it.
Yeah.
So I went on stage with my little box and put the box next to my chair.
Your Continuo set, yeah.
Yes.
Theorbo, baroque guitar, and concertina.
And left the box closed, of course, until we got to that piece, and then whipped out my concertina and stood up and played that piece on the concertina, and it went down really well with the local audience, of course.
Of course. I'm sure it was great. Yeah.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, we actually repeated that concert in Berlin, I suppose a month or two later, where we played in the Pierre Boulez Saal.
Mm.
And I assumed, well, in a sort of serious concert series in Berlin, in the Pierre Boulez Saal,
that's
probably,
too much.
Yeah,
that's
that would
too
be
much.
going too far.
Yeah.
But no. They were absolutely determined that I should bring the concertina along and play it there. So I can say, I'm not sure how many people can say they've played the concertina in the Pierre Boulez Saal.
Next time you get an invitation from Akamus, like they make sure, like, please bring your concertina.
What next? Exactly.
Exactly. Don't forget your concertina. Well,
we're here to talk about lutes, I think, aren't we?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So you started playing concertina, and how did it develop in music, in the music section?
I suppose the next development would be when I went to secondary school when I was 11, and I had the opportunity there to learn an instrument.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to my mum about this, and we looked through the list of instruments you could play. I can't remember what they all were: saxophone, trombone, piano. Well, piano was out of the question. Or string instrument. I would have actually liked to play the violin with my mum.
Yeah.
But she doesn't really remember, but I do remember that she wasn't very keen to teach me herself, which I completely understand. But I think it was also not so easy for her to think of another teacher nearby who she'd be happy having teaching me. So in the end, I did play the viola actually a little bit later, but I never learned the violin.
The viola, classical viola.
Yeah. I actually went for the guitar.
Yeah.
I thought about the bassoon for a while, and my mum said I'd be very useful as a bassoonist. Because orchestra is always needing bassoon players. Or was it the oboe? I'm not sure. I can't remember. And in any case, I went for the guitar.
A reed instrument.
Yes, exactly.
Some reed instrument. Yeah.
Not for any really good reason, just because I quite like the guitar. And I would say it was a stroke of luck.
Okay.
Because I had a really great teacher called Tony Dodds. I hope Tony, you're listening now.
Tony Dodds.
Tony Dodds, who,
And it was like popular guitar or already classical guitar?
No, classical guitar.
Classical guitar.
Yeah. So Tony was really the opposite of Mr. Osborne, my piano teacher. Yeah. And what I remember from Tony is him giving me lots and lots of music to get through, and I devoured this music. Just like when I started playing the piano, when I started playing the guitar, I practiced every day. I was very motivated. I wanted to learn, and I just got through piece after piece after piece, played through whole books of music.
Do you remember the kind of music it was?
Oh yeah, I remember. I remember he published books himself, his own little tutor, which is very good actually. I got through that pretty quickly, and then also just books of guitar classics, Saw and Julian, Aguado, all of those classic pieces. And also he introduced me to lute music, because he is very interested in lute music, and he made a lot of arrangements of lute music. So often I would turn up for my lesson and we'd just play through lute duets on the guitars.
Great.
So I played actually rather a lot of lute music before I'd even ever seen or heard a real lute. But more than anything, I think Tony just didn't get in the way of my progress on the instrument. Let me get on with it and gave me support, and we often had little concerts and things together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you started with guitar at 11?
Yeah.
And then you stayed with the guitar, practicing it, having lessons until?
I had a short stint on the electric guitar as well.
Yeah, like
most
all
teenagers.
of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was great, and that came around the same time as another stroke of luck, I would say. There was a cello teacher at my school who was very, very interested in improvisation, and he started an improvisation group at lunchtime, on a Thursday lunchtime.
Why have lunch when you can improvise?
Yeah, and actually by that point, I think I was already meeting up with other school friends and improvising at lunchtime, on our electric guitars and things. But this teacher came and it was, more like a formal improvisation group. And the first day, I remember lots of people showed up. Probably, lots, 10 or 12 children. And then it slowly sort of reduced until there was a sort of core group of about 3 of us. who were really serious actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we learnt about all kinds of different improvisation, from Indian music.
Wow.
We learned about ragas and
Incredible.
what else do we do? Of course, jazz. And
Jazz.
blues,
Mm.
and free improvisation and experimental music,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like Cornelius Cardew and those
Wow.
experimentalists. It was all completely
Incredible.
new territory for
Yeah.
me, and very inspiring. I was very, very into that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly at that time on the electric guitar. Yeah. And then at the age of 15, it's funny to think all of this was happening in just a few years. Because by the age of 15, I was kind of done with the electric guitar. And I had the opportunity then to start having my guitar lessons in London at the Royal
Mhm.
Academy, at the Junior Academy.
Okay.
Again, on the suggestion of my mum, who kind of, as a musician,
Yeah.
she knew the paths, I suppose, available.
When you're playing these lute duets with your teacher,
Yeah.
did you know they were lute duets?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or like he told you about, oh, there's
Yeah.
another instrument.
I think we tuned our third strings to F sharp.
Ah, okay.
and
Yeah.
put on capos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you knew like what a lute was, or
I
like
suppose so.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I did.
okay. And then with
Yeah.
15, you went to this other school.
I think at 15, that's right. I did my grade 8, which is the highest grade in the grade
Mhm.
system in England. I can't remember if I was 14 or 15.
Mhm.
In any case, I was quite young, and I think I just needed a more high-powered teacher, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
to really refine my technique and get me up to the next level. And so my mum knew about the Junior Academy system, which is it's a Saturday, well, not Saturday morning, it's kind of all Saturday really, at the academy, where you can go as a teenager and get, of course, I got guitar lessons, but I also had theory lessons, choir, chamber music, many other aspects of music making.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I started when I was 15, which was quite a big deal, really, because I had to take the train up to London every Saturday, which was a 3-hour train journey. So I'd get up I think I took the train at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I'd get to London soon after 9, travel across London, spend the whole day at the academy having my lessons.
Yeah.
And then travel back the same evening, which for a 15-year-old was really...
It's a lot.
Yeah, it was a big commitment. And I did that for 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Before then, I was able to go to the senior academy.
To the senior
The
academy.
full-time academy.
I see.
Yeah.
So you stayed 3 years in this school, from 15 to 18?
Yeah, every Saturday for
Every
3
Saturday?
years, I'd go up to London and...
And then you go to the senior school,
exactly.
always with the guitar.
Yeah, with the same teacher.
Same teacher.
Michael Lewin.
Classical.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Michael Lewin.
Michael Lewin.
Yeah, great teacher.
Yeah.
Also played the lute at some point. I think I was lucky, to have teachers who were certainly very interested in early music and lute music and supported it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
at 18, you went to the senior academy?
Actually, at 19.
19.
Does that add up? Actually, no.
Should I
it
get a
doesn't at all.
calculator?
Must be something wrong, wasn't there? Well, maybe I went at 16. Oh God.
It's okay. It's
Old
okay.
age.
Around that time.
That time. Yeah.
Time now with with the pandemics, time is abstract. It's like sometimes I think, no, this was not so long ago. It was 2 years ago. Yeah. But
yeah,
anyway.
I think at that age, at 15, that was the point where it sort of became quite clear to me that I was going to become a musician. I suppose the commitment was so big, and going to London, at school I was top of my class. I didn't know any other guitarists who could play as well as me, and then suddenly I was in the junior academy, and there were 4 other guitarists there my age, and they were all better, and so it really raised my game.
Yeah.
And Michael was amazing, really, in helping me to refine my technique and just become much more focused, to practice really well.
Yeah.
That was really important.
Yeah, no, it's a very big step when you play guitar and you really like playing guitar or any other instrument, and you get to a certain level, but it's still, very connected to your enthusiasm and your fun to do it. And then when you get to a point that if you really want to pursue this, you have to put a lot of time and dedication to raise your level.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think all
To a
these
professional
things
level,
are
going to
very
a professional
important,
level.
though. I think also sometimes, I always played a lot. I always practiced a lot. And I think there were periods in your life where you just have to just practice a lot, play through a lot of stuff, forget about technique, and if you're really interested in something, then you just go through it and do it. I still do that, actually. So I think especially for young people, it's probably important not to sort of force them into this kind of serious, focused practicing too early, because at that age, it's very important just to they have so much motivation and interest, just to explore.
Yeah, sure. So you were at the academy now you were in the junior academy for some years.
Yeah.
And now you went to the senior academy with the same teacher.
With the same teacher. I had that teacher, Michael, for 7 years. Yeah.
That's quite a long time.
And he was really a very good teacher and very committed to his students. Invested a lot in his students.
In the senior academy is already like a superior course.
Yeah. I did my bachelor.
It's a bachelor. Okay.
Yeah. And Michael was also very well organized. So we had a lot of master classes with all the most famous players. I remember John Williams coming, and David Russell came very regularly. I remember playing Bach to David Russell. It was fantastic. Wow. Julian Bream I met a few times.
All the very big names.
Yeah, all those really, really famous people. It was a great time. I even won the Julian Bream Prize, which is
amazing.
One of the very few, possibly the only competition I've ever won, which was a big boost to my confidence.
Yeah, of course.
Time. Yeah. And also Michael had us doing lots of other things, not just playing our solo music, but of course chamber music as well. But he ran a class called Fingerboard Harmony, where we had to learn other things, like we had to learn basso continuo, we had to learn jazz harmony, which I found pretty challenging at the time, but it was great to have this basic knowledge.
Yeah. So you did the bachelor?
I did the bachelor.
And then?
And well, actually in the third year of my bachelor, by that point I was already very interested in lute music. I was playing, of course, a lot of Bach and Dowland
with the guitar.
On the guitar, and I think Michael even suggested to me that I should have a go on the theorbo, because I could borrow a theorbo at the academy, and everybody told me, it's much easier to move to the theorbo first, because playing with nails and single strings is less complicated. So I got in touch with Elizabeth Kenny, who was the lute teacher at the academy, and was able to get second study lessons with her. So for 2 years, my final 2 years at the academy, I was doing both instruments. And veering more towards the theorbo by the end of it. Although I must say I always regret not practicing more, not really having the time
to practice
dedicate. Yeah, because I was so busy as a guitarist.
No, to do both at the same time, it's poor.
So it was a sort of
that's a lot.
Yeah, it was a period of what's the word for it? Gestation period, I would say.
Okay.
When I was at the academy, where my interest was growing.
Yeah.
my abilities were perhaps not developing at the same rate as my interest.
Yeah.
Lessons with Liz were fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
She gave me a really good, solid technical basis.
Mm-hmm.
Also in Continuo. And Liz had studied with Nigel North. So I feel like my start with the theorbo and with early music in general was very much kind of in that line, let's say, which changed a lot, of course, when I came to Basel. And I would say actually also, in fact, before I started playing the theorbo, the first early music instrument which I got experience, I'd forgotten that, was actually the cittern. Because a friend of mine was putting together a mixed consort and had to find people to play all the funny instruments. So
all the cousins that
so he asked me to play the cittern. So I think already in my second year at the Academy,
you played the cittern.
I borrowed a cittern and
before,
I played along.
Then you borrowed the theorbo.
Yeah, before actually I borrowed the theorbo. And it's a great way in for a guitarist to get some experience in early music, to play in a mixed consort. Yeah. Like that. Because as a guitarist, you, especially if you've got any experience with electric guitar, you've played with the plectrum.
Yeah, metal strings.
Yeah, you can pick up a cittern and it's pretty easy just to play it. Bandora as well. Sounds great with nails.
Incredible. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
So I did a few projects like that with mixed consorts, and we even, Liz put on a mask performance when I was at the Academy. I remember
mask performance.
No, not one of those masks. A Jacobean.
Now we have to make the difference.
Mask. Yeah, we do. And I was involved in that. So things were happening, and I think it's often like that. Your first experiences stay with you, and so I mean, even today I'm very interested in mixed consort music. I had this group in Basel. We're not very active anymore, but for a while we played a lot together. And it's something I do with my students a lot.
Broken concerts.
Especially because I mean I teach in Berlin and I have quite a small class.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Soon, and it's a nice way to sort of augment the class a little bit, because you can bring in people from the guitar department.
And chamber music is essential. Yeah, great. So so when did the lute really enter? So you started playing theorbo. That's already lute. So, but it was still your main subject was still the guitar.
Yeah, that's right. Well, more or less. I finished my guitar studies in 2004. And that was it, really. I put down the guitar, I cut off my nails, and I carried on playing theorbo, also baroque guitar by that stage. The other thing which
still at the same in the senior academy.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing which had become really, really important to me at that point was Alexander technique. So I'd had the opportunity at the Academy to have a year of Alexander technique lessons, and then I was able to get lessons in a group for a couple of years, and then in fact I managed to get another whole year of individual lessons on top of that. So I got tons of Alexander technique lessons when I was at the Academy, and that became increasingly interesting to me. So by my fourth year, I was really very, very much influenced by Alexander's technique. I was experimenting a lot with positions. I don't know, have you done Alexander technique?
I just briefly, in kind of workshops, masterclass, like very little, but I never really dedicated time to it.
So it's also very much about how you think and how your thoughts have an effect on how you hold yourself, how you are physically. And so I remember spending a long time, in the practice room, not playing very much, but thinking a lot. And I was very, very interested in these things. I read books about Alexander technique, and I did quite a lot of mental practice. And at the time, I was practicing a lot, and I had some trouble with my wrist.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't chronic. I think I would have got through it anyway, but it was...
Left hand wrist.
Yeah, left hand. I remember, getting some sort of pangs of pain occasionally, which worried me.
Okay.
And I think the more, when I was under stress and practicing a lot, that became more frequent. So I think when I was preparing for my final recital, I actually had to reduce the amount of practice I was doing. So I did a lot of mental practice.
Yeah.
And that also incorporated the Alexander technique.
Yeah, but this is something we can talk about because, of course, the way we practice is one of the most important things.
Yeah.
With our playing in the instrument and learning the repertoire, and not only lutenists, but everyone, we have the tendency to overdo things or to do more repetitions than we actually need or something, and then this ended up causing stress on our body, our tendons and muscles. Especially when I was close to my recital, also I started having also a little bit of pains, because I think it's everything together, because you want to practice a lot, and we have this feeling. It's very common to feel this feeling that we don't do enough. It's like when you do mental practicing or any other of kind of very effective practices, but it's not really with the instrument playing. You feel that it's not enough, that you're not doing enough to learn it, that you need to repeat more, and this can go completely against yourself.
Yeah, I think often a lot of our practice is us trying to prove to ourselves that it's working.
Exactly.
And if it's working, that should be enough.
Exactly. And then we need proof that it's working, and then starts to not work anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think Alexander's technique, it just started to have a bigger influence on my playing, I would say, than my instrumental lessons at the time. Which I think is probably inevitable after 7 years with the same teacher.
Yeah, of course.
There's a point where you need to move on.
A lot of our development is trying to take out physical blockages. That we have it subconsciously, and Alexander technique will do exactly that. When you try to solve this, then other things musically come up naturally.
Physical blockages. I think I had come to a sort of, maybe a mental blockage at that point when I finished at the Academy, and I really wanted to change direction. I mean, giving up the guitar, cutting off the nails was one thing. That was the point when I moved to Switzerland. I wanted to live abroad. At the Academy, there were so many students there from other countries. I felt sort of left out as being a Brit. I also wanted to have the experience of living in another country. Yeah.
And why Switzerland?
Combination of reasons.
Yeah.
One of which was I found a school in Basel where I could train to be an Alexander technique teacher. Of course, there are many other schools, there are lots of very good schools in England I could have gone to, but I wanted to get out and go somewhere else. And so I found a school in Basel which I really liked, and so I signed up for that. And that's what I did then in the first 3 years when I was in Basel. I did a full-time Alexander technique training course. Yeah, which was a really interesting time, because for the first time in years, my main focus wasn't actually music. I was studying Alexander technique.
And were you practicing lute or guitar?
I wasn't practicing the guitar anymore.
Just the lute?
I was teaching a bit of guitar.
Did you have a lute already?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't start the lute until I went to the Schola 3 years later.
Okay.
It was a great time because it was a very experimental time. I was in a new country. I didn't have this pressure on me to be a musician, which actually allowed me to experiment a lot, and I did all kinds of different sort of music. That was the whole period. I was playing the concertina and busking and playing in a pop band and doing all kinds of other things. yeah, it was very, very good, that period. And what it allowed me to do was to really make a positive decision when, after those 3 years, of course I was playing mainly Continuo, playing in orchestras.
And you got like borrowed instruments?
No, I had a theorbo.
You had a theorbo.
I had my theorbo by then.
You had
and
a
baroque
theorbo.
guitar.
And baroque guitar, okay.
So I had quite a few orchestra gigs and things without ever really having studied properly. Yeah, and I started to play with a chamber music group, and there's a group called Ricci Capricci in Karlsruhe. Yeah, so I'd spend every other weekend I'd be going to Karlsruhe, rehearsing with them.
Germany,
we had a lot of concerts, and this, I think, was probably that experience really that brought me right back into the music world, and I would say, then to really make a decision. My main focus will be music, and at that point, I also decided it seemed to me a bit silly to be living in Basel, to have lived there for 3 years and not to have studied at the Schola. So I signed up for the Schola and I got a place.
You're probably the first musician that came to Basel not for Schola, for something else.
Exactly.
And then, this happened to be the Schola also here.
I just happened to be living there, playing the lute.
What a coincidence and a luck. Yeah. So it's very interesting.
Well, I think I really had enough of institutions when I finished the academy. Yeah. And I think it's always been very, very important to me to somehow work things out on my own and to find my own route. And I spent really those 3 years doing that until the point where I felt able again to become part of an institution. At the beginning, I thought, I'll go to the Schola. I signed up for something called Fortbildungsstudium.
It doesn't exist anymore. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. You just get a certificate at the end of it. And I thought, I'll do 1 year at the Schola. That should do it, you know.
Yeah, I think it's now what would be the Ergänzungsstudium.
Something like that, yeah. And in the end, I did 5 years at the Schola. I think once I got in, I was hooked. Yeah,
the little bug of early music.
Yeah, and simply just at the Schola, there were so many possibilities. Even in 5 years, there were many things which I would have still liked to do, which I hadn't got around to yet.
That's one. I think Schola is very good to experiment because you have so many people from so many different places playing so many different instruments, and it's a very free institution in a way that to do chamber music, and it's not very squared. You have a lot of freedom.
You do. You've got this wonderful courtyard in the middle, in the cafeteria where you can meet up with people. Yeah, I remember sitting out in the garden with lutes and playing duets and improvising together. I think that's a really creative environment. Yeah.
But at some point, it's very important that when you got there, you were not like a kid, like with no idea of what you wanted. You have already some maturity because together with this freedom, if someone is a bit immature for this, they don't really profit as well as someone has already done some things, and you had already stayed and doing other like Alexander technique, and you had experience already, more stuff to know a little bit more of how to enjoy and profit from your time there.
I think so. Yeah. It's true. It was good to come to the Schola with that experience. Although, of course, some people come to the Schola with no experience and they learn everything there.
So you stayed 5 years?
In the end, yeah.
Okay. And you ended up in the Fortbildung, or you went to the...
I did 1 year of Fortbildung, and then I switched to do a master. And did 2 years of master with Hoppy, and that's the performance where I really learned Renaissance lute. Most of the focus was on Renaissance lute.
Until now, it was theorbo, baroque guitar.
I mean, I also did both those instruments with Hoppy. But no, I think the main thing I got from the Schola was learning to play Renaissance lute.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things I did when I got to the Schola was I realized that the Schola owns a sitar and a bandura. So I was very interested in getting a broken consort together. So yeah, that's something which has always been really important to me. And when I left the Schola, one of the first things I did was to buy my own sitar and bandura, so that whenever I wanted to, I could get a group together and play that music.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my first year, I was having to work quite a bit, teaching guitar and playing, of course, to make enough money. I had to still pay off my Alexander training course, which had been very, very expensive.
Yeah,
and I had a
huge
imagine. Debt still to pay for that. So it wasn't so easy with money.
Mm-hmm.
But I was lucky that I applied for a scholarship, which I got, which was a 2-year scholarship from the Leverhulme Trust in England, which was a very, very generous scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really a stroke of luck, because it allowed me to, well, first thing I did was to give up all my guitar teaching, which really freed me up to have more time and focus to practice. And actually in the second year of the scholarship, which was my final year with Hoppy, I decided to not do any gigs. I think with Hoppy's approval, or perhaps it was even his suggestion, I simply turned down all my Continuo gigs that year and just really focused on Renaissance lute. And that was such a luxury, and I'm so glad I did it, because it's so rare in life that you can you don't have to think about earning money. You can just really focus on the thing that
you really want to.
And that's something which for me was so important at the time. And I think it's a real shame when I see how much students are having to work these days. Most of my students in Berlin, all of my students in Berlin teach the guitar, which, as long as it's not too much, it's okay. But as soon as it starts to restrict you, I mean, you can't really have a productive and fulfilling life as a student if you're busy having to earn money. I've had students who work in supermarkets to earn enough money, which is a shame. We can talk about these topics also a little bit further on. And so you did this first master, and then you did another master then in Schola. I did.
For the 5 years.
Exactly. After I finished with Hoppy, I did a master in basso continuo with Jesper. And it's funny, actually. I think Jesper was one of the main reasons I came to the Schola in the first place, because I'd taken part in a course with Jesper at the Handel Academy in Karlsruhe. And I found that so interesting. It was a chamber music course, but he spoke a lot about Continuo. Jesper Christensen, for those who might not be so familiar with him.
He has also a book about basso continuo.
It's a very famous and well-used book. And he's a real authority. He's a harpsichord player and very, very experienced teacher for basso continuo. So meeting him at the Handel Academy in Karlsruhe, that had a big influence on me. I mean, I'd never learnt Continuo properly. I felt very aware of this fact before I came to the Schola, that there was, I could play Continuo, I had the experience, but I had never really formally learnt it or understood it. So this really felt like something lacking in me, and this was something that I really hoped to develop then with Jesper. So while I was studying with Hoppy, I went to Jesper's classes and lectures, and I already learned and developed a lot.
But it still felt like I need Like
it just seemed like a really good opportunity.
Yeah.
A little bit as I felt with the Alexander technique, I had a taste for it, and I wanted to go into it and see how far it would get me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same with Jesper.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to learn as intensively as possible what he had to offer.
Yeah.
And I think I am still the only lute player who did this master with him. And we worked very intensively together.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, in the class was full of
Harpsichord players.
Yeah, so I learned a lot about harpsichord playing, and also about the sources for harpsichord.
And it's completely different. It's when I learned basso continuo on the harpsichord.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So it was my first contact with the basso continuo was the harpsichord, and I have to say it's like learning basso, like how basso continuo works, and learning all the intervals, the chords, the harpsichord. It's an instrument where it's very easy to visualize everything. Yeah. Because you have each key is a note, so you can see basically everything so visually, so much easily than a lute instrument.
Yeah, or especially a theorbo.
Especially a theorbo with the tuning.
Different possibilities to play the same note.
Exactly. For understanding the concepts and the structure, it's much easier on a harpsichord. Yeah. Then of course the theorbo with this funny tuning, then you have other possibilities of playing and effects that the harpsichord doesn't have. Yeah. But to understand the working and the forming of chords, it's very useful. It's much, I think, at least for me, it was very clear in my head how it works. And how was it for Jesper to teach you on the lute?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, because did you feel a struggle from his part for some things, or because of the differences of instruments and possibilities, or
no,
it was never
just
a topic?
Felt like a very fruitful collaboration. Mm-hmm. Because he came firstly with a huge knowledge, also of the lute sources. Mm-hmm. I think he knows the continuo sources for the lute better than most lutenists. Probably. He's very familiar. He's made his own transcriptions of the tablatures, and has always been very interested, and has also worked with a lot of lute and theorbo players over the years. So he came with a lot of knowledge, but he also came with a lot of questions and things that we had to look at and to solve together. So he might say, well, on the harpsichord we would do it like this. Is that possible on the lute? Yeah. And sometimes it was, and sometimes it wasn't. And if it wasn't, then how could you deal with that, or what could you do as an alternative? So it was really very interesting for both of us. Yeah. And also the sources that we have, I suppose, of course, on balance, there are more sources for keyboard instruments, but there are certain areas where we have more sources for theorbo or other plucked instruments, which show us things which are missing in the keyboard sources. So I think it's really good to look at sources for different instruments. For example, in France, the first 3 sources for continuo are all for the theorbo. Yeah. And then you start to get the ones for the harpsichord. It's true. With Fleury and that's right.
But it's very interesting because also one advantage of the lute or the theorbo, it's the tablature, where you know exactly what they wanted. Sometimes in some examples where you have just the continuo with the numbers in a score, there are many possibilities. And with where to put the voices, of course there's a lot of examples with score where you have everything written down, but sometimes you don't, and sometimes you have a tablature, and with the tablature you know exactly what happened. Yeah. And if they did any kind of alteration or ficta, and
Yeah.
that's everything written down. Yeah.
One source which might surprise listeners, which we looked at a lot actually, was Matthäus, his false consonants of
For the
music
baroque guitar.
for the baroque guitar, which I think a lot of us lute players, guitar players, we take it for granted a little bit. We have this source, and we probably, most of us have played through it. Have you played through it?
Through it, no.
Never.
Through it, no.
No.
I've played a lot of some examples
Some
there.
bits of it.
I've read. I didn't play everything. I played bits of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting. All these 7/6 exercises that he has.
They're very nice.
It's a very nice.
Because I think we take that source for granted. I remember Jesper saying he considers Matthäus one of the most important continuing treatises for any instrument. Because it's very rare to have a treatise which is so full of fully written out examples which look like they come from real music.
It's true.
Presumably they're not, because I haven't actually found any of these bass lines in Matthäus's pieces, but they really look like they could come from real pieces, and he shows you exactly how to do it. I think it's very refined as well, this mixed accompaniment style with strumming and plucking.
Yeah, it's true. I remember I played one or two in a Vortrag in Schola at some time, because it was about basso continuo and with different instruments. I think Peter asked some students, and I ended up playing the one or two examples from my taste.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. Like, it was very nice. It's very structural. It's very like repetitions of the same progression in that time, in that particular one. But it's very dramatic. It works very well. And he, I think he's very honest also in the things he writes, and he assumes the disadvantages of the guitar and what the guitar can do, cannot do. And he said when you have like this jumps of octaves, or when it goes too low, you should do this, and he's basically showing what the guitar can do.
Yeah, he's also aware of the advantages of the guitar.
Yeah, of course, both sides. But I think he's very honest. Yeah,
because there was a few places, I think, in the book where it's a funny combination of the book, because the text is in English, but it seems like the plates of the musical examples must have been prepared in Italy. Because they're in Italian.
Yeah.
And so there were a few little comments to some of the examples. It's the ones that go into more extreme keys, where he says that if you want to play these examples on a keyboard instrument, you need to have special extra keys to do so, because of the tuning, of course. Yeah. And I think this is something we often underestimate, or we're not always aware of. The plucked instruments had this advantage of being able to play in all keys, theoretically, at least.
Well, if you're using an equal temperament.
Or something close to it, which we assume that they probably did. Whereas keyboard instruments, it seems like the from what Matthäus says, this was then not acceptable, because of the tuning on a keyboard instrument. And I think today we look at this the other way around. We take it for granted that a repetiteur will be very happy to transpose a piece of semitone or something for a singer. And keyboard players generally expected to be able to play in all kinds of wild keys, whereas guitarists, we like to play in keys which are nice on the guitar, and we don't like to play in difficult ones.
No.
I think if we look at the early sources, it was really the other way around, actually.
They were playing everything.
Yeah, and we look in the guitar music, find Passacalias in all keys, and then the examples of Matthäus as well, in the most extravagant keys. It was something which they obviously did, and that was an advantage of a plucked instrument.
It's true. It's a very good point. And one of the things that Continuo, that harpsichord players, it's difficult for them sometimes to to transpose to a lute instrument or any kind of plucked instruments that do continue, because it's so different from their reality, is that, and I experienced that also in Schola through improvisation lessons, that the teacher was a harpsichord player. It's amazing. Harpsichord player, improviser, is sometimes that the, you know, to do a note on the cembalo, you just do like boom, and you have a note. Like, and with a plucked instrument, unless you're doing an open string, you just need one finger, but to do one note you need both hands. And these already limit us. It's a limitation for you to the possibilities of things that you can do, because the left hand, the other notes you can do are connected with the note that you're already doing. So things that you can do in a harpsichord like this, very far away, if it's not an open string, you cannot do on an instrument, on a plucked stringed instrument. And sometimes I remember, like, and in these lessons, like, he would do amazing things, and then okay, but I it's not possible, like, on my instrument to do this. I have to transpose it in a language that I could do on the lute, or like when you have lute music and you transpose literally to a keyboard instrument, it's extremely simple, you know, because for this language for the lute works very well and it sounds amazing, but for a keyboard piece you would need more stuff at the same time to sound just as good as it does, because they are completely different instruments. And when you're having lessons with a teacher that play a keyboard and has a keyboard on his mind or her mind, sometimes it was a bit difficult to try to understand the other's instrument and to understand how it works.
Yeah, I had improvisation lessons as well at the Schola, and that's, if I'd done another master after the lute master, and
it would be improvisation.
Master, it would have been the improvisation master. I got actually really, really into improvisation.
Yeah, it's a subject that I really have a special connection to. It's really it's a very interesting subject. And I'm actually doing a PhD research now that goes into improvisation, but it's not really connected to the lute, but improvisational practices with counterpoint and more voices improvising at the same time. It's amazing. It's amazing, especially in 16th century. And it was a way of learning music for the singers in a church or a monastery, or it was even like offered to the people in the town. Like it was one of the jobs of the chapelmeister to teach everyone that wanted. So he had to have people not only that were going to sing in the choir, in polyphony choir, in plain chant and polyphony choir in the church, but also people from the city that wanted to, such as like Santa Maria says in the 16th century, that singing in thirds is something that of people that don't know music. It's so simple and obvious that it's like something that the normal people do, but because of this kind of folk and educational thing of singing more voices, so it's about that. So it's about this kind of polyphonic improvisation, which is really interesting subject. And
isn't it funny that, as you said, back then it was such an elementary thing which you could do just with the the normal townspeople. Like today, we're often so scared of improvisation and professional musicians.
Because it was very disconnected, from learning music. It became something very, in a way, of theoretical, reading something that's there and reproducing what's written there.
That really changed.
And that was something that came later. Music was about the producing music, and writing would come after, if it came. So it's really a different approach to it. And I think they really perceived music as a language, as something that you learn its rules, and each type of music has some different types of rules, like different languages have different rules, and you form sentences in a kind of different way, but at the end you have to, you know, like kids they learn how to speak and to improvise speaking for 3 years before they're going to learn to write their own name.
It's interesting you compare it to a language, because that's something I've often thought as well. But particularly the way you learn improvisation is, for me, very like the way you learn a language. In that, particularly, you need to have the right balance between theory and practice. So, of course, you need to learn the theory of counterpoint or the style in which you want to improvise. But the practice is so vitally important as well. Just as it is when you learn a language, you can sit there with a grammar book and learn all the rules.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the experience of speaking in conversation, then you can't communicate.
Exactly. It's like I use always this example with my students. You know, you don't learn how to ride a bike by reading a book.
Exactly.
You know,
yes.
You have to ride it.
Yeah.
You know, and you can understand theoretically how it works, but until you ride it, you don't know exactly what it is and how it is. You know, so music should be the same. And you know, when a child learns to write an A and a B and a C, she's already speaking A, B's, and C's for years, and she's just learning how to codify what she already knows. But can you imagine, like, and what do we usually do with music now is that we learn to write something that is not a language still. We don't know how to do it, and you're already beginning by writing or recognize it through the writing. And you know, like they said, or even if you go to folk music now, some kind of folk music in different cultures, and like there is a kind of singing that everything is in thirds, or everything is in sixths or thirds or some kind of interval, and that's completely normal for them. That's how it is. You know, that's how they learned, and probably they have no idea what they're doing, but they're doing. And should be a little, at least my perspective, and I think that's where it came from, because it's completely connected with improvisation. If you don't learn it as a language, the improvisation is completely cut out.
Yeah, I think my experiences of improvisation lessons might have been a little bit different from yours. I consider it again as a stroke of luck that I landed with Rudi Lutz he's no longer teaching at the Schola, so
you had a lot of strokes of luck.
Yeah, I really did. I mean, Hoppy and Jesper and Rudi, they're such pillars of their
absolutely,
or whatever.
Absolutely,
And I had lessons, I think, for 2 years or 3 years with Rudi, and what I got most from those lessons, of course, he came, you know, Rudi with lots of ideas and things, but a little bit like with Jesper, I don't remember him really showing me or telling me what to do or making any really very concrete suggestions about things. It was much more about maybe bringing some lute music to get an idea of the style, and then creating things, you know, in a similar style. So I got what I think I need, because as I said, I'm quite independent and I like to work things out by myself. And he really supported that. He gave me Aufgaben.
Homeworks
stuff to do, and I'd go, and then I really worked hard at it, you know. And I found myself composing sort of for the first time in my life, as you said, improvising, and then improvising a bit more until a point where you've sort of composed a piece without having set out to compose. And I'm sure that this is much closer to how music was composed historically. And it's also the same when we think about jazz musicians today, creating music out of a jam session, or theatre
Yes.
Actors
Yes.
improvising
Yes.
to create a work of
Yeah.
theatre.
It's something that always exists and it continues to exist. Only, of course, the styles, the way you do it changes. Like it did change from all the centuries of music that we do. Like,
Yeah.
and depending on the place and exactly the time, but it's something that never kind of ceased to exist only in the classical music world.
Yes.
Well,
Also, improvisation for me, it was a bit like going back to my roots, back to those teenage years of jamming on the electric guitar, and this sort of freedom you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really came back, and it was so nice to develop that on the lute as well. And what I got, especially, I think, from Rudy,
Yeah.
is of those two elements we were talking about, the theory and the practice. I got the practice from him because I'd have a weekly lesson where I would have to present something I've been working on, and he also offered a weekly Klassenstunde, a class lesson, where again I would be expected to present something in front of the other students. And then there was also a monthly Klassenstunde where also the students from the other improvisation teachers would present their things. So I was improvising in front of somebody or a group at least twice or sometimes 3 times a week. And that was the most important thing, I think.
Yeah.
Just to be in the situation where you have to do it. And since studying at the Schola, I continue to try to put myself in these situations where I have to improvise. So I try to find ways, at least somewhere in every concert I do, for some kind of improvisation. Of course, as a continuo player, you're kind of improvising all the time. But it's different when you're improvising a little solo piece.
Yeah, completely different.
Something.
Completely different.
And it's such a good training. And just for my own personal training in improvisation, I really try to find those places where I can improvise. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I find it's very important also to, like any language, it's about practice and doing it a lot. And of course, having some kind of a critical thinking about what you're doing to develop. But it's like practicing a language. Also, like it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
And one other thing while we're on improvisation, which I also value a great deal, and which I notice more and more when I'm teaching, is if you are able to improvise or you have experience in improvisation, interpreting a lot of music becomes a lot more natural, I would say, because much of the music which we play comes from an improvised tradition. If you play a toccata or a fantasy, these are pieces which were improvised, and the written down versions that we have are written down improvisations, or sort of idealized improvisations perhaps. And it really makes a difference how you perform these kind of pieces. If you have the experience of improvising yourself, because when you improvise, there are several processes that go on. It's one, if you just play a piece off the page, you look at the music and you play the notes, and it's got a kind of horizontal thing.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're improvising, there are moments when you need a little bit of time to think about where you're going to go next. Or maybe you play a trick on the audience and you build something up and then you surprise them by going in a different direction. And these are all elements, musical elements, which we can learn to employ much more naturally if we have the experience of improvisation.
Of course.
Music making becomes a much more, also a physical thing, where the connection between what you're doing and what you're thinking becomes closer.
Yeah.
And this is something, again, I experience in my teaching. People come and play a Kapsberger toccata very well. no technical mistakes and musically. And often the one thing that is missing is the feeling of the music coming into being in the moment and being surprising. So the performer's also surprised, as we know, Kapsberger, at these unusual twists in the harmony or things. In the way that when you're improvising, you might also surprise yourself or surprise the audience, or need a bit of time to consider how to get into or out of a sequence or where you need to go.
Yeah. But even if you... I like to compare a lot. Let's compare to improvisational music that we have today. Like if you would ask for a player, like a jazz player, to try to reproduce a solo by another player, it's even difficult to reproduce your own solos.
Yes.
If you're improvising something, one of the most difficult things to do is like when you finish an improvisation and someone asks, "Can you do exactly what you did?" It's against the purpose of it. And to reproduce and to try to reproduce someone else's, it's almost an impossible task. And this kind of music, this early music, there are supposedly improvised, like the fantasias, caras, toccatas, to try to get a grasp of this improvisation that someone else did centuries ago and wrote it down, and without trying to make it your own a bit, it's very, very difficult. You have to make it as if it were your own improvisation, and otherwise it's impossible to grasp the essence of this music. And even if you try to do it to copy a recording, it's already extremely difficult. Extremely. And you have the audio. Yeah. And to do something that you have no audio, and it was supposed to be a kind of improvised music, it's almost unless you do it your own, or of the notes that are written, I think it misses the purpose. That's my opinion. And also when you say improvisation, a lot of people saying that, okay, I'm just taking the instrument without any kind of thoughts of planning, and I'm just going to play whatever comes. And it's not like that. You have to have some kind of planning of where you're going, otherwise it's going to be too late. If you get to this point where you have it so in your fingers and everything is so automatized that you don't have to think, you're thinking it kind of in a second level, and at some point you have a structure that you're following. Even you do a prelude, I start here, then I go here, then I'm gonna go here, then I'm gonna finish here again. So you have a plan of what you're going to do. Sometimes exactly what you're going to do in between, maybe not, but you know the direction of it.
It's funny, when I have a plan and I improvise in public, it normally goes wrong. If I improvise without a plan, it normally works much better.
Really?
Yes, because if you have a plan, you have the danger of making mistakes in a way.
Okay.
If you decide, I'm going to go to this key and then do this sequence and then there and then this cadence, if something goes wrong, it can really throw you off. And that tends to confuse me. And under pressure, things do sometimes go wrong.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's very tempting, especially if you have a live radio broadcast or something, and you're supposed to improvise a prelude. It's very tempting to try to work it all out before, even if just in your head, and then do it. But I find generally more successful is not to have too much of a plan, and also not to try out too much before you play. It's happened to me a few times, even in recording sessions, where the conductor has said at a certain point, okay, I think now it would be nice to have a prelude from the theorbo, or maybe the singer needs to get a note or something, and you're just thrown into that situation where you haven't had any time to prepare, and you have to just come up with something. It's happened to me a few times, and normally, of course, you get a few takes in a recording session. Normally I've tried to do, if I've had 4 or 5 takes, to try to do 4 or 5 really completely different things and not try to kind of replicate the thing which I've just done. Because the danger is of making mistakes in your improvisation and it throwing you off.
Mm-hmm.
I actually like I think for learning improvisation, of course, it's very, very good to learn these, to have a plan, to know what sequences you're going to use and cadences and modulations. But there's also something to be said for throwing yourself into the deep end and letting the music take you and listening to yourself. I found this especially in French music, actually. If you're trying to improvise a prelude non mesuré, it's great to try to get lost. I think a lot of those preludes are quite like that. Sometimes I try to lose the sense of the key I'm in and not think too much about where I'm heading. And you can sometimes find yourself in rather exotic territory.
Do you find?
And then of course the job and the interest in the piece is how you're going to get back from there, and then you have to come up with quite creative solutions or surprising solutions, which can be musically interesting. Perhaps in a written piece, you might not do it like that because you might end up with some, funny chords which are not allowed or jumps and things. But in an improvisation, then you can. If you can sell it, you can get away with anything.
That's another question. So, about this approach, how when you don't set a plan, is it easier or more difficult for you to repeat some kind of things? Like what I'm trying to say is, sometimes for me it's very useful to set out a plan, because sometimes I'm gonna throw myself out in my plan and try to put things that I'm not used to do. So I'm gonna be forced to try to do that, like to modulate to some tonality that I usually don't or this kind of things. And if I don't set a plan, I started to come into the things that I already know how well to do, and I kind of repeat myself, And this is one thing. Does this happen to you or not? And also, if you try to lose yourself a bit, is it a purpose of you also to try to get a little bit out of style? Is this not a concern for you, or do you let yourself go, or you try to stay? Because if you stay on a specific style from a specific music, then you have some possibilities of ways to go. Like, you're not completely free.
Well, I would say 2 things mainly about that. First is we should make a difference between an exercise, which you might do in your practice room, and what you do in public in a performance. And I think the idea of setting yourself certain goals in a plan, modulations and things, is very good as an exercise. But in a performance, it can tend to sound a little artificial, and detract a little bit from just you being in the moment in the music, which tends to communicate best with an audience. And the other thing... What was the other thing?
It's if you don't have a plan and try to throw yourself out about.
Well, style. Again, ideally, you will know the music so well. You will have played so many Kapsberger toccatas in your life and preludes that you won't be in any danger of doing something out of style. And at the same time, the best music always pushes the style to its limits. And I'm sure that's what the greatest players did at the time. I'm not talking about introducing maybe elements of some contemporary music, some jazz or something into early music. I wouldn't do that. But perhaps
taking some chances
being
inside
a bit
that language,
provocative, let's say, or modulating in ways that you might not see in the written music, but make a sort of kind of sense in the style. I think that's got to be a good thing. And there's the quote about Frescobaldi. I don't know if you know the description of Frescobaldi from the French gamba player André Mougard.
I don't know.
As I probably can't quote it right.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at quoting things properly. As I remember, he says you can't fully appreciate the true art of Frescobaldi until you've heard him improvising on the harpsichord toccatas in the church to a cantus firmus on the organ. And I think that's the key, isn't it? We can read through his music as much as we like. We can read the descriptions, but he must have been doing something extraordinary in these improvisations, which just could never quite have been written down or transmitted.
Yeah.
And this is what's so great about improvisation, because we do have that freedom to experiment, and we can be forgiven for it because we are improvising, which we don't have in written music. Yeah. At least not to the same degree.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things about, and I think about improvisation that really cut its wings a little bit is the luxury of taking risks. You know, that kind of it's not admitted in a classical concert, you know, like so many people when they go to a classical concert to see a concert, and the concert is amazing, it's very good, and when they leave they talk about the mistakes that the you know, that the player did, or and even us, like how we are, like when we play a concert, usually at the end we have regrets about the things that did not work out, you know, and improvisation will comport risks, and I know incredible improvisers that will restrain themselves a lot in concerts because of the fear of not something happening or not going well, and although they are incredible, but I think this is another thing that the I don't know how much the public would care, or how much it would be something that's really, that on the other hand it will be admired by and especially this word now, the authenticity of it, because it's something not trying to use the term as the early music used some years ago to try to reproduce something that happened many centuries ago, because that's not possible, but authenticity in a way that in relation to you as a musician there, like you know, and making an appropriation of this music as your own, on the style that we assume it's that style, and try to make it in your own, in that language.
Yeah, that's so important.
How many times, so it's a very practical question, how many times when you improvise in a concert things went bad?
They used to go bad more often than they go bad now.
With practice or experience,
I think, although even now sometimes even the simple preludes, it goes bad normally, because I try to plan something before I start. I might have an ambitious idea, and then I start playing and I forget, and then I get so distracted by it not working out as I planned, and I get confused. But it happens less frequently.
How much did it bother you?
Not that much.
Not that much.
I think I'm a bit reckless.
And
really,
how much
about stuff like that.
That's I think it's a good posture regarding this kind of things, improvisation. And how much do you think bother the public?
Not much.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. The thing about making mistakes and improvisation, I always had a lot of trouble with my memory. As a guitarist, I always had memory slips. Always in the most important things, like in competitions and stuff, I'd have a huge memory slip and forget half the piece. And, that really bothered me. It made me very scared about playing from memory. And I must say that's one of the other things that has helped with improvisation is now I feel even if I'm playing from memory, and I do like to play from memory actually, if you can improvise, you can get out of the most awkward situations somehow or other. I mean, you're not going to have to just stop and give up or reach for the music. That's actually made me a lot more relaxed about playing from memory. This feeling that I can rely on my improvisation. And then the other thing you mentioned about mistakes, I think it has so much to do with recording, because so many of our concerts these days are recorded and broadcast or put on YouTube. I mean, some concerts in the last few years have been only recorded with no audience at all, as you know. And it's really that does change how we play and how we feel in concerts
completely.
And it's something to be considered. I had a recital just before Christmas, and before the recital, the organizer asked me, would you like me to record the concerts? And I had to think about it, because and I said, actually, no, I'd rather not have it recorded. Which is a shame in a way, because I would have liked to share the concert with some friends. But I know it would have made me play slightly different. It would have taken the focus away from the moment of the live concert. And I didn't want to... I didn't want anything to get in the way of that. It's a big topic now, the recordings and streamings and everything, with the situation as it is. It became like a solution at some point in the beginning, and maybe it's something that's staying, like even with public, it's also recorded, and it's also like a way. Well, in a sense, a concert series here in Europe can be seen by anyone else in the world, which is something new. But at the other way, also this kind of concert or music itself, that's something that, you know, it's a time experience. Like it begins, it has a middle, it ends, and then it's lost. You know, this goes away. This goes away. Like it's not lost anymore. So for sure, it changes our participation, our perspective on it. Something that would be much more risky at some points, and then you think to yourself, oh, but it's being recorded. If I'm too risky and I mess it up and it's in YouTube, people are going to see that and they are going to think I'm a bad player, you know, because I mess it up here, and so maybe I won't take this risk, you know. It's happened as well occasionally. You know, I've been to a live concert which has been amazing, and I've had this memory of this wonderful, wonderful concert in my head. And then maybe years later, I've heard actually the concert was recorded, and I've heard a recording. And it's often, it's not... It
doesn't capture.
And I trust my memory. There must have been something about that live moment that was very special. Although I think
it's different media.
It is different media. I think it's good to be very clear about those things. I like making recordings actually. You know, with lots of edits and very artificial, of course, trying to produce a sort of ideal version of something.
Exactly.
which is just a different art form, really.
Yes, I don't think
to a live concert.
it's artificial. It's like a painting or a sculpture. The painter has all the time in the world to change everything he wants and to make it perfect. But it's going to stay like that. It's like a recording. It's going to stay like that, and it's completely different. And how many times also you hear a CD and everybody experienced that, and the CD is incredible and amazing.
Yes.
And then you go to the concert and it's not exactly what you heard in the CD.
It's not healthy, is it? People get unrealistic expectations.
Exactly, and completely unrealistic expectations, and it's just very different kind of media.
And actually, some of the worst concerts are the ones that do sound exactly like they do on the CD.
That can also be, because it's very It doesn't work. It doesn't have the presence that a concert requires, and that sometimes musicians lack a bit. This stage theatrical side, that sometimes it's awful. The music is great, but their presence on the stage is like disaster. If you close your eyes, it's amazing. And then you look and then okay. Like in with students, sometimes you see that they go into a stage, they don't know how to enter a stage, they don't know how to behave themselves in the stage, in spite of the music.
I think we could get into a really long and interesting conversation.
This could last hours.
especially about recordings and the influence of recordings. And I'm very interested actually in old recordings. How people played in the past, the kind of things that were done, and the crazy things that were done, the things that sound so illogical and erratic to our ears now. Things have so much been kind of ironed out. Since the recording industry started.
And all you can do miracles today. Like you can do anything you want, basically. Like with all the softwares and everything. It's like it's the sky's the limit. But that's really another discussion. That's
well, I think it's one thing is the recordings, and then the way that trickles down into the way we play as musicians in live concerts. And we start to replicate recordings.
Yes. Of course.
It's very worrying, I think.
And for sure, like if I'm playing a concert and then I'm playing a concert that's being recorded and there's a microphone very close to me, you cannot play the same way. Otherwise it will not work very well. It will be very and at least from my experience, I have to play a little bit when the microphone's too close. I have to play more softly in a way. I cannot like really go for it because it will just be noise if there's a microphone so close, and or a lot of noise or mechanism noise from the strings, and something that sometimes in a concert where the audience is, especially with COVID, that they're like further away, I wouldn't care so much because the result there, what they are hearing there is not what the microphone is hearing next to me. It's like you put in besides an organ player and just like
of course,
it's like this kind of.
There's this quote, isn't there, about from the 17th or the 18th century about the theorbo sounding quite unpleasant close up, but from a distance.
That's I think when the use of nails. When Mattheson writes to, I think it's Mattheson and they are Weiss and Baden. I don't know. He's talking about the people that play with nails. That I think from a distance is better, and closer is worse. Yeah, something like this. It's very interesting. So after you studied in Basel, you stayed in Basel as a lutenist performer, and you also, like, since when are you teaching in Berlin?
It's my fourth year of teaching.
It's a fourth year already.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I think so.
Yeah,
it went fast.
I remember when I saw the news that you're teaching there, and it doesn't seem 4 years ago.
No, it doesn't. No.
Crazy. And how it's been?
It's been great. It's been, as all teachers will tell you, it's been a fantastic learning experience.
Yeah.
And I've had wonderful students. and it's really inspired me in many different things, which I'm not sure I would have got around to if I just continued in my playing career.
Mm-hmm. And it's in the UDK?
In the UDK.
In the
Universität der Künste
Berlin.
Right.
And is there like a early music department?
There is.
Many instruments?
Actually, it's quite a big department, really. You can study, let's say, most early music instruments there. Harpsichord,
Amazing.
of course, recorder, flute, bassoon, oboe, the cello, gamba, fortepiano, and lute, of course.
Incredible. And you can study bachelor and master?
No, you can only study master. At least for the lute. That's a real shame. I wish I could take bachelor students. I really wish I could.
So a student can only do master for like 2 years.
Yeah. Well, there were two different master programs.
There are two different master programs.
There's an orchestra master, and there's a soloist master.
Okay.
Orchestra master. This comes really from the modern departments. Yeah, of course. I mean, for us, that really means somebody who is doing maybe more continuo and more chamber music.
Okay.
And for the soloist master, of course, you have to really show yourself as a solo player. So it's possible to do 4 years.
You can do both masters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's such a nice environment to be in. And what I like is I like the energy I get from the students. Because I think once we're in the profession, let's say, I mean, it's not that we lose our enthusiasm for the music, or maybe some of us do
at some point.
Some jaded orchestra musicians, but
when all concerts are cancelled.
Yeah, but there's something about it. Let's say it doesn't surprise us maybe so much. And what I like about teaching is the freshness and the surprise and the interest I get from the students, which reminds me that what we're doing is really interesting, and it gives me a lot of motivation, actually. And that's been really, really helpful, especially in the last few years when we've had the pandemic and many people have been feeling pretty depressed about their life in music.
Yes. Also for the students, like
it's been terrible.
Your perspective kind of you don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. It's a bit tough.
So I mean that's one thing which I love about teaching. I'm very grateful to my students for giving that back to me. And then of course it's the stimulus you get. I mean, when I started, I only had one student who's now finished, Max Hadwig. Hello, Max. Who he was interested in lots of things which I'd never really looked at before. One of his big interests was German tablature, which I never learned to read. So I had no choice. I had to
start
learn it. And that was. I think most of us had, during the lockdown, a few little activities that we did which we hadn't got around to doing before. And so I spent several weeks during the lockdown reading through the Neusiedler 1536, this big, thick book of German tablature. And I feel now, having done that, I can read German tablature. I don't think I would have got around to it, or maybe not been so motivated to do it had I not had a student who was interested in it. Or another thing which we did with Max. Max was doing this soloist master, and as part of that he had to play concerto. Now there were not very many concertos to choose from for the lute. I mean, we have the Vivaldi. We have a few 18th century things.
Exact German music.
Yeah,
also.
Max didn't play baroque lutes, so that narrowed it down.
He was just which instruments did he play?
Renaissance lutes and theorbo and baroque guitar. Yeah, so there wasn't a lot of choice, and the thought of doing the Vivaldi again, just didn't really appeal to either of us that much.
But he had to do a concerto?
Yeah, it was. It's in the Studienordnung, you know.
Oh, okay.
If you're going to be a soloist, you have to play concerto.
It's very classical.
So I remember
department.
there's a composer in England, Steve Goss, who recently wrote a theorbo concerto.
Oh, and how was it?
Yeah, well, so we got hold of Steve Goss, and
Yeah.
it hadn't actually been officially published yet, but we were able to get the music and work on this piece. And yeah, it was really fascinating, a fantastic piece of music. I must say, I got really into it.
Wow.
And it was, you know, completely new territory, working on contemporary music.
Yeah.
Very virtuosic, really technical difficulties, which seemed almost unsurmountable. But I found that really fascinating, and it was a really fruitful experience, I think, for all of us.
Incredible. And it was a concerto and with orchestra, or like?
Yeah, it's with a string orchestra.
String orchestra.
Max did it with a quartet, which is also an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So those kind of experiences I really appreciate from teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've also learnt a lot, strangely enough, from having to listen to exams, because as a student you're always on the other side of the exam. You're always the one having to do the exam. So I did get a certain amount of kind of enjoyment from finally, you know, being on the examiner's side, on the commission, and not being the one who has to sit there and prove myself. But more than anything, if you're on a commission, or it's the same if you're on the jury of a competition, you have to have an opinion, and you have to be able to
articulate
it. Yes. So I think I learnt to listen much more critically from having to assess concerts like that. And that also brought me more awareness of my own performances, let's say. The things I saw in exams which were good or maybe not so good, of course, they made me think, well, do I do those things? Should I maybe do that a bit more, or should I do that a little bit less? That's actually been very helpful. I think the main thing which, well, several things which I feel I've learned from listening to exams. One is successful exams, successful performances are those where you feel that the performer is really engaging emotionally and even physically with the music and with the instruments. That's what, for me, makes all the difference. You always get performers who technically don't have any problems and can produce good versions of pieces. But if this kind of real deep emotional involvement is lacking, or and for me it's also a very physical thing as well. I think music making is really physical.
It's a physical knowledge.
That certainly made me think again about my own performances and my own performing, and I try to become more involved emotionally and physically when I'm performing, because I see that's what makes a performance interesting or not.
Exactly.
Makes you want to listen or not.
Exactly. And we used the word more authentic.
It's like we were talking about with improvisation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing I would say is a kind of risk taking, or
it takes much more effort, also much more to give yourself, like, to it's more it requires much more of you in that moment. It can be something very easy to just play something.
What I mean with risk taking is more doing things in a way that we might not normally do them. Because most of what we hear in early music is, there's certain styles, and we tend to stay within those boundaries. And occasionally you hear somebody who's really doing something which takes you out of your comfort zone. And it's, again, a little bit what you experience when you listen to these old recordings and you hear crazy tempi, or or changes in tempo, or rubato, or things like that, which often sound all wrong and surprising, and you have to work a little bit as a listener to try to understand what's going on. I really appreciate those kind of things when I hear them in exams, because I think as musicians we need to have something to say, and it's worth taking the risk to say something that people might not like that much, or might be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that, again, of course, tends to be more personal as well.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's very nice to hear all this experience with Berlin, and that it's going nicely, and that you have space there, and that is a nice department, and things are going well.
It's a great city as well.
It's a great city, Berlin. Yeah.
Especially if you live in Basel. Basel is a great city as well.
They're completely different. There
are times when, if I've been in Basel too long, I just can't wait to get to Berlin. And I'm not sure if I would be in Berlin, if I would live permanently in Berlin. Yeah. I'd probably really appreciate Basel.
Yes, it's 2 worlds apart. Really. Another question that I always do, or that I like doing to lutenists, is lute. Well, we have so many instruments and so many different instruments in the same family.
Yeah.
And how do you? And I know that you play many different instruments. How do you deal with it? Like with all the differences from, if you have to play a concert, or if you have to practice, or like between Renaissance Baroque lute and also the Continuo instruments.
Yeah, I'm not sure I am very good at dealing with it, really. I remember Hoppy always used to say it's good to really concentrate just on one thing, and you can see in his career he's done that. He's really spent years on what Baroque lute, on certain repertoire, and he's made recordings, and then he's moved on. Very, very sensible. I like to do lots of stuff at the same time.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, but it is a good point. For a while, I thought I need to deal with all these different instruments. I need to somehow standardize my approach. So I developed a sitting position, which I use on all my instruments.
All of them?
Pretty much, yeah. And also right hand position. I got so sick. I learnt to play lute thumb in with Hoppy. I don't know. I didn't feel completely comfortable with it at the time. And anyway, I was playing theorbo guitar thumb out, and I thought, well, from now on, I'm just gonna play all my instruments thumb out. Also Renaissance lute, and I did that for many, many years, actually, until the point where I couldn't remember anymore how to play thumb in. That was one way to deal with it. Just to try to, have the same position, the same technique, the same string tension, to reduce the differences between instruments. But then, probably at about the point where my thumb out technique was working really well, and the point where I'd forgotten how to play thumb in, that's probably when I started to get interested in playing thumb in again, and then I had to try to remember and to work it all out again, which I found really hard.
But for all instruments, just Renaissance lute?
Just Renaissance lute, yeah. And now I'm again happy playing thumb in on Renaissance lute. And about switching between instruments, Actually, I'm fairly happy now. I think if you're very clear about your technique and how it works, it's not such a problem really. About different tunings like arch lute and theorbo. One thing about tunings, I think it's good to learn all these different tunings when you're young. I know I started to play theorbo when I was 20, 21, and I didn't find it very hard to learn the tuning. I think you learn in a very natural way, and I just picked it up and didn't think too much about it. And it was a bit like that with the lute as well. In my mid-20s, late 20s, when I started to play the lute and the arch lute as well. It didn't take me too long. I remember the first gig I did on the arch lute. That was quite hard. Not to just jump to the theorbo shapes, but to really play the arch lute. Yeah. And I still don't feel quite as confident on the arch lutes as I do on the theorbo. Now in more recent years, having played baroque lutes, I started playing baroque lute after I left the Schola, and I find dealing with the tuning of the baroque lute much more challenging. Perhaps it's because I'm not thrown into playing Continuo on the baroque lute so much. I have a feeling it's also age. I think the older you get, the harder it is to learn new things from scratch. So I would advise people. I wouldn't say it's like from someone that already has experience with lute instruments, not really from scratch. Like you have to adapt a lot. The tuning and the shapes, and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's quite new if you haven't played the baroque lute before. Tell me about a little bit your experience as a lutenist. After you stayed in Switzerland and started working as a freelance lutenist, and a bit of the projects you did and the people you played with. And I think I do a bit of everything really. I'm not somebody who does a lot of opera and continuo. I'm also not a soloist. I'm teaching, but I try to combine all of those things with varying degrees little bit of everything. Success. Because I'm interested in all those things. I do orchestra projects, of course, like we all do, and opera. I quite enjoy working on operas. I love working with singers, particularly. I'm probably more interested in chamber music than orchestra, as you can imagine. And more than solo also? Solo has been growing on me in recent years. I feel for a long time I was not really interested in solo. I was interested in playing occasional solo pieces, as part of a bigger program. Yeah. But I feel now much more interested in giving solo concerts, actually. Part of that has to do with having a baroque lute and having all this repertoire, Bach and Weiss and Falkenhagen and everything else, which I feel very motivated to explore and to present. But Continuo has always been really important to me, and that's why I like chamber music. I don't so much like this kind of Continuo where you sit in an orchestra and you have to thrash away to be heard at all. And I prefer more refined Continuo in a small group, or just with a singer where you can really think about all the nuances of voice leading and position and colours in the chords, that kind of thing. So there are a few groups which I work with and very much enjoy working with. One is I work with a recorder player called Laura Schmid. We have an ensemble called Distinto, together with Enrico and Bruno harpsichord and a gambrin cello player. And we've worked together for a long time. Can't remember, 10 years or something. Had a lot of concerts and recorded a CD as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's been one of those really fruitful
Yeah.
chamber music ensembles. Another group which I like to work with is with Toby Miller, who plays the hurdy-gurdy, historical hurdy-gurdy. And again, we've had a few concerts, and we will have a concert actually coming up now, I think in March, in Zurich,
Mm-hmm.
and recorded a CD as well. And those are the kind of groups, 3-4 people, where you a really worked out, nicely organized continuo
Mm-hmm.
can be very effective.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I like to do. Yeah.
Great.
I don't know.
Do you have any future projects coming on, like things that are already coming on, or ideas of things that you'd like to do?
I have one project actually. I have to give you a flyer
Yeah.
for it, which is a little concert here in the library, in the
Which library?
Basel West
Okay.
Library at Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
That's coming up in February, and it's together with a singer, with Gunhild, who is a wonderful Norwegian singer. And actually, we started working together during the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
She called me up
Mm-hmm.
because she was missing music making,
Yeah.
and as a singer, I think especially.
Yeah.
As a lute player, I was quite happy actually to lock myself in the practice room and play for hours and hours and read Neusiedler.
Mm.
The singer, I think, it must have been much harder.
Mm-hmm.
So we started working together during the lockdown, reading through lots of music, without any real focus or intention to present
Yeah.
something. And we both became very interested in Ferrabosco. Ferrabosco's one book of airs.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided, well, we might as well just really focus on this. We don't have any pressure to put
Yeah.
a concert program together or something. Let's really get to know this music. So we spent a long time actually going through these
Mm-hmm.
airs. And there are many aspects of them. There's some very famous authors who composed the poetry. You have music, texts by John Donne, by Walter Raleigh, and Ben Jonson. Of course, these very, very famous personages wrote music which was set by Ferrabosco, wrote texts which were set. And then there were also many aspects in the book which I think to modern audiences are very interesting as well. There's quite a lot of stuff about gender, let's say. There's at least one or two songs from a woman's point of view, which is quite unusual in the lute song repertoire. And other songs about marriage rights and things can be disturbing in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is dedicated to Prince Henry, the son of King James, if I'm saying all this right, who was a great music lover and died very young. So historically, there's some songs also dedicated to Prince Henry.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, having looked at all this repertoire, we thought that we really have to get this out to an audience. This is too interesting just to keep for ourselves. And I was able to organise a concert as part of a series which is organised by the library here in Basel. They have a series of English-speaking events. And to complement the songs, we decided also to ask a historian to be involved.
Very nice.
Kirsten Bentley, who is a friend of mine, and will then present some context to the songs and discuss a bit about what life was like and the themes which come up in the songs and also the texts themselves.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing which I'm very interested in. I'm very motivated to do, and I think for audiences as well, it's very rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yes, to have this combination of music and and history. It's a very nice combination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that sounds very interesting. Please don't forget to give me the flyer.
Yeah, will do.
So I can attend. And yeah, I think this was a very nice conversation.
Yeah, it was.
We talked a lot about a lot of things, and we could stay here for hours more talking about many stuff. And I'm really happy that you came, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
So that's it. Ciao.